Good morning to those of you out there on the West Coast. Good afternoon to those of you here on the East Coast. Welcome to the daily live sales training that we're going to be doing here in a minute. I do want to start off with just a tip. For those of you who show up early and on time, I really appreciate the fact that you do show up early and on time. So I want to give you a little thank you gift through a tip. And so my tip for you today is to share your own tips. This is something I'd highly recommend you do. I teach customers to do this all the time. Is that on social media, in a blog post, on your website, in YouTube, you can do a short, whatever it is, whatever you're comfortable doing, sharing a tip every single day that's related to your core competency. And this is really important because if you went to a whiteboard like I go to every day, if you go to a whiteboard and put a circle in the middle and put in, the idea down, let's say SharePoint, for example, you can throw out 10 tips probably really fast. And then if you turn to people who are in your company and say, hey, we do elevators. What tips can I provide on elevators? And it could be simple things like, did you know that here's the top 3 manufacturers of elevators? Did you know that these are the 2 different type of braking systems? Whatever it is, it doesn't have to be a lot, but what it's doing is you're providing tips to your potential buyers and teammates, letting them know that you're the subject matter expert. You want to contrast this with the mistake I believe people make sometimes of talking about what they're not an expert in. For example, you'll rarely, if ever, see me say anything about pricing or the FAR. For example, I'm not an expert on those. I'm a small business owner in the government space, so I know about them, but I am nowhere near an expert on them. And I don't claim to be. I claim to be a federal sales expert, right? I'm good at business development and capture, all leading into a strong proposal. And so that's what I write tips about and the information that's related to that. And that's what I'd encourage you to do, because in LinkedIn in particular, but on YouTube and in your website, your buyers will find you. And when they find you, you want them seeing you for what you're selling, basically, right? And you're giving this information away freely. So that's a really important thing to share out there and consider. And so it's a tip, is my way of just saying thank you to those showing up early and on time. All right, let's get rocking and rolling with how business developers should or could or can do research that'll get them in the door with federal agencies. Let me just hide that little guy, make sure I'm good to go. And good morning, by the way, to everybody who's saying good morning in chat. I really appreciate it when you engage in chat. If you don't know this, when you engage in chat, social media, LinkedIn, YouTube, et cetera, pushes the notice out further to other people. So they let them know, hey, we're live. We've got some good stuff we're talking about. So thank you for engaging in there. I want to talk, speaking about LinkedIn, and the tip today, a friend of mine, Shauna Weatherly, she's also a member of the GovCon Chamber of Commerce Sustaining Membership. She's also a strong proponent of sharing what she knows with industry, with folks who are in the government contracting world. She just shares it out freely. And this morning, she shared out a tip, which I thought was really convenient and nice of her to share a tip out related to my training. It was not intentional, but she shared a tip out about research and as a background, she spent her career in the federal government as a contracting officer at various levels, right? And she was sharing a tip for success on her LinkedIn profile, so you can go check it out. It's a nice, long, thorough tip. But if I boil it down, she was recalling this one small business who had called her up and asked for a meeting, right? And they didn't have any federal experience. They were just reaching out, trying to have a meet and greet type meeting. But they clearly did their homework. When she talked with them, she could tell they did their homework and they knew about her agency. So she gave them a chance, right? That instantly put them in a good light with her. And the reason was because she knew that they cared enough to do their homework first, right? I talk about this all the time, about doing your homework. And my point as it relates to this, because it turned out really well for that small business as it navigated her agency, is that nobody cares what you know until they know that you care, right? Does that make sense? And the idea is the way you demonstrate that you care is by doing research, by doing your homework, by learning about that agency. And so we want to show people that we want to build relationships with, federal buyers, teammates, et cetera, that we care and we do our research. The first step of business development, if you watch the 7-step process that I lay out, I'll show you that a little later, the first step of business development is gaining agency knowledge and knowing that agency better than anybody else. We do this through research. That's why research is the very first step of the 7-step process that I teach. And that's what we're going to cover today, research, why it's important, a little bit about what you'll understand, and then how. I'm going to give you specific places and tips on how to do research so you can learn an agency better than anybody else out there. And so if you believe that research is valuable, if you understand it like I'm saying, that it's the valuable first step for a business developer, put research into the chat. Let me know that's why you're here, that you're here to sit there and learn tips about how you can become better at research. Just put that in the chat. If you don't know who I am, my name is Neil McDonnell. I'm the president of the GovCon Chamber of Commerce, and I want to welcome you to my federal sales training where I provide tips for success in the federal market. I spent 20 years as a small business owner in the federal market, and since 2018, I've been teaching people like you that government contracting is not a secret, it's just a process. When we follow a process A to Z, we have predictable, repeatable results, and that's what I want for you. It's why I do this training over and over again. Do me a favor, though, before we get started on today's training, help buyers remember who you are. Help me and help others in this community remember who you are. Put your company name and your core competency, 2 or 3 keywords, into the chat. Just let us know who you are. Do this every single day that you come to the training, because you'd be amazed who comes in and watches my training, including people all the way to the highest levels of program office and acquisition shops within the federal market. These are people who are buying what you sell. They're not buying what I sell. They like that I'm bringing you to them, right? So let them know who you are by putting your company name and 2 or 3 keywords about your core competency. Finally, I wanted to say thank you to our sustaining members. We are not funded by the federal government. We're not funded by large primes. We're self-funded, right? Sustaining members like me and like you are the ones who make these trainings possible for all small businesses. So on their behalf, I just wanted to say thank you to the sustaining members out there. Thank you very much. Okay, let's go ahead and get started talking about research and why it is important. And I am going to share today, so let me just share my slides. So we're talking about research, and I want to talk about why research is important, and I have several bullets. I'll go into that in a second, but I just want to put it in context with the entire 7-step process for success in the federal market. This is the 7-step process diagram that I teach people, right? It's what I help people with when we have our workshop. It's typically in this first 3 steps, but research is the very beginning part. Whether it's a federal buyer or teammate, you're trying to understand them. You're trying to show them that you care enough to learn about them, right? And so research starts the process, and from there you get everything else. And I'm not going to walk through this process today. You can learn this somewhere else. But the biggest thing is when you do research correctly, it's one of those things. I talked about this last week in a training where I said, understand your one thing. If you do research correctly, it will make all other 6 steps in the 7-step process that much easier. If you don't do research, it's going to be hard or impossible sometimes to succeed. But if you do research, guaranteed, it'll be easier to do all other 6 steps in the process. So I want to lay out some reasons on why research is important. And I'm going to try to go through and give you some ideas about it, and then also maybe share a little story about where this fits in, where I see it getting done. But a big part of research and doing your homework is to let an agency know, hey, I understand your mission. I understand what you're trying to accomplish, right? The Department of Education has a vastly different mission than the Department of Energy, which has a different mission than the Department of Army. Understanding their mission, having that situational awareness, the mission awareness about what they're trying to do, and how anything you sell, services, products, et cetera, are going to contribute to their ability to accomplish their mission with the lowest cost, lowest risk, and most effectiveness. That's vitally important for communicating to a customer that you care, right? Showing them that you actually took the time to understand the mission. And you'd be amazed how many people in agencies talk about us small businesses coming in and we want to work with them, but we don't even know what they do, right? Do you understand? Yes, the Army goes off and fights wars or something, but what about TRADOC? What about this part of the Army? And what do these people do? The Army doesn't have one vast mission for every command. Every command has their own mission. They're tied to higher level missions, of course, but they all have different missions, and some of them are training and some of them are fighting, right? And so understanding that mission awareness is really important. As you go forward and you're developing, you're researching further in, you're going to be able to uncover the challenges and pain points. And so if you talk to any proposal writer, they're going to say, hey, do you understand the customer's challenges and pain points? I can write all day long to a proposal. I can write a proposal all day long that's reflective of the RFP and the PWS, But that's different than business development and capture, where you're going in and understanding an agency or a customer's challenges and pain points. What are you running into, right? What's giving you difficulty? What limitations are you facing? Maybe it's not an actual, I try to do this and it breaks. I do this and it breaks. Maybe it's just a limitation, like we don't have enough of something, or our capabilities are not strong enough. And so understanding those pain points and challenges are vital to getting an awareness of that customer. And then the counter to that is just understanding where are they trying to go. First, it's where are they, the current situation, the challenges they face, any pain points, and then understanding the strategic direction as they set their goals, their objectives, the activities that go into those goals and objectives, how they're going to measure their activities. You're able to find all this information out. I'll show you how in a minute. But understanding that in those first 3 bullets, you're going to communicate, hey, I care enough about your agency that I took the time to understand your mission, what you're running into right now, and some of the ideal state you're trying to set for yourself. And this is where I think I can help you. Or more importantly, let's talk about how to get to that ideal state. All right. So other reasons on why it's important to do your proper research, right, and homework is that when you have all this knowledge from those first 3 bullets, you'll be able to influence your customer. You'll be able to influence agency buyers, et cetera, through your discussion with them. They will see you as a trusted advisor. When I'm talking about influencing, I'm talking about the influence that comes from being a subject matter expert who has taken the time to research and has put themselves in this position of being a trusted advisor. They will trust you, and now they will begin to listen to you and hear some of your ideas, take some of your ideas. That's the ultimate business development and capture activity, is if you can influence the requirements through the dialogues, right? And so that's really important. You'll be able to demonstrate your agency expertise. This is really good. This goes back to Shauna's post earlier today that I talked about, where this person came in with no federal experience, but they had agency knowledge, and she could clearly see they did their homework. And so she allowed them further into her world, to talk to them more, to maybe guide them a little bit more, right? They eventually did win a contract with that agency. So it worked out really good for obviously the small business, but also the agency who got access to them. When you do research properly and you gain all this information, you're going to go in and have meetings where you're talking about them. You're not talking about you. There's this mantra in sales that says features tell, stories sell. And an expansion of the stories is questions, right? When you're having a discussions and dialogues sell. If all you're saying is how great we are and all the things we can bring to you, then that's not what they want. And that's not going to move the sale forward. And it's certainly not going to help them as they're trying to understand where you fit, where your solutions and products could help them. But when you take the time to research, the reason it's so helpful to you is that you will be able to have discussions, but those discussions are about them, about their goals, about their challenges, about their pain points. Let's talk about it some more. You really don't talk about your solution yet, right? That's further down in the sales cycle. And the last thing I just want to talk about is it shifts the authority in your favor. I've talked about this in different training, but authority can be here, here, or here. So imagine that you're this hand and you come in, and typically small businesses, we might feel a little bit, I don't know if subordinated is the right word, but we kind of look up to that other party that we're meeting with because, it's the customer. We're pretty excited to meet with them. But as you do some of your research, you come up to an equal level where you're having a meeting as 2 colleagues who are in different companies, but we're going to be working on some similar challenges. We're going to be talking about similar things. You're feeling pretty good. But if you shift the authority in your favor, that comes from research. And I'll give you a quick example. Gus, who's a business partner of mine now, but he was an intern when I met him first, and I was training about the whole GovCon world, and I realized how spectacular he is. But he didn't know anything about government contracting. So we sent him into DLA, and I said, that's where I want you to go because, the company he was working for wasn't in there, and it was perfect. I said, go in here. Here's the process. And he was following the process of doing research. And just to speed the story up a little bit, through his research, he found all this information that I told him to find. And he had this one particular document that when he went into a meeting, because he had read all the information he could find, he came up to this level. But because he mentioned this one particular document, and some of his questions were, hey, customer, I was curious about this on page 75. It says this kind of thing, and I'd like to explore that more. The customer said, what's that document you're talking about? They didn't even know that it was one of DLA's own documents. And that's not a bad thing. This is what I mean by you can become an expert at an agency better than anybody else, because most people are stuck in doing, focused on their one job. Well, your one job is to become an expert on DLA, for example. And because he was able to do that, this young business developer was able to move the authority up to equal. And then through that conversation about the next document, just shifted the authority. It didn't mean they were in charge. Of course not, right? But it just meant that now this person was looking to this person for valuable advice. They started looking at them as a trusted advisor. And that's what I want for you, is to shift the authority in your favor by doing research out there. So do me a favor, just put shift the authority in the chat if you're following that. Let me know you're tracking on that. And I want to talk really quickly. I did this yesterday's training, so you can watch this yesterday's training. All week I'm going to be talking about business development. But I want to save time, a lot of time, for the next slide, which is about how do you do business development. So in this slide, though, what I was talking about is when you go into an agency and you're learning about them, I already mentioned you can learn about their challenges, pain points, goals, what they've done, right? But then you can begin to learn about the organizational structure. How is that organization, that agency organized? What are their different offices, right? There are hundreds of offices within an agency. Taking the time to do research allows you to build out an org chart so you can truly understand who they are and who you might talk to. All these people, one way or another, might influence your sale that you're trying to do. You can learn about their annual budget, right? How are they spending money? How are they spending money on what you sell? Who typically tends to drive it forward? You can learn about not just the contract vehicles that are used, but how is it being procured? Sometimes the procurement is done by a different agency or a different command than the ones who are actually the users. And so understanding those things comes from research, understanding the agency's acquisition process. And the last thing, which I really love, is this ability, when you do your research, you can start learning who are the winners in the small and large winners out there, not just through FBDS, but through relationships that you develop. Your research, when you go in, for example, I was looking at Transcom, United States Transportation Command's industry day. They just did one earlier in April, and I'm going to share it out probably tomorrow. And in there, I'm able to look who are some of the incumbents out there, who are some of the people working. But sometimes I can also see who's showing up to industry days as interested vendors. So your research can lend a lot to understanding the agency as well as the companies who are trying to sell to it. Okay, I think I'm going to stop sharing because I don't want to distract you with all of this on here, but I do want to go into this last slide. I want to talk about how to actually do research. And the first thing you should do is stay hydrated. This is exactly, by the way, what I'm teaching you is exactly coming out of my business development course. It's a business development master course. It's the most complete course out there, but I don't sell it. I built it. I was going to sell it. I have a different agenda for it outside of the government contracting world, and I can talk about it another time. But it is available to sustaining members. For sure, you can get access to it. But I'm just pulling whole modules out this week and teaching it. So what I'm teaching is what's in the course. It's just a lot more expanded in the course. Anyway, so let me tell you about how to research. And I'm going to give you 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 ways. I should have numbered them instead of doing bullets. But I'm going to give you 7 ways that you can do research. So the first way is going into an agency's website. Every agency is different. So every one of the tips I'm telling you, it might be easy to find the information. It might be a little harder. You might have to dig. Sometimes they don't actually put it out there. So we'll talk about these different tips, but keep that in mind that some of these will have the information you want, some won't. All right, so the first place you go is the agency website. First place always. Go into an agency website, and you can go into the About page. Is one of my favorite places, right? If you click on About, you generally will see them laying out things like here's the leadership, maybe here's the organizational structure, et cetera. But you can also see, here's key strategic documents that we have. The About section is one of my favorite places to just use as stepping off to other places. Another great place, and I'll just use 2 for today, another great place on a website, typically on an agency, is how to do business with, NAVC as an example, right? If you go in there, they've got a lot of material that they provide industry on how you can learn about their agency, how they're, what they spend money on, which commands or subordinate commands they have within NAVC, because they have a lot. So beginning to understand that, you can get a lot of that information on an agency website. First place. Second place, and this kind of continues with the agency website, but sometimes these documents that I'm going to tell you are off the website. I have no idea why. But you want to read agency strategic documents. So number 2 for how to do research is read agency strategic documents. I'm telling you right now, if you can become a reader of these documents, you will find absolute gems. I have found information that I'm fairly positive no one has seen except for the people who wrote it, because it is so dry and long and hundreds of pages. But when I go in, it is exactly what I want. It tells me offices and who's running it, what the primary mission is, and the different structure. This is something I couldn't find anywhere else, right? And that comes from research. So these type of documents that you'll look for, first one is strategic plan, and maybe somebody can type these into the chat as I say them, just to help others out who come along. But the first one you want to find is the agency's strategic plan. Every year they put out a strategic plan. Some agencies put out a 4-year plan, typically tied to the administration. So when new administration comes in, you might see these 2022 to 24, 21 to 24 type strategic plans. But whatever it is, it's their strategic plan. And so sometimes they're a couple of years old, and that's totally fine because their management leadership is still operating off that plan. The other one is annual reports. So strategic plan is forward looking. What are we going to do? Annual reports are saying, hey, what did we do? Not last year, but really it's one whole fiscal year before that, because it takes them a while to write it, but it's still fantastic. Here was the major efforts that we did. Some agencies are really good. The fiscal year ends in September and they have it out like by March or something in the next year. But getting access to that annual report tells you about some of the challenges they faced. Here's what we were trying to accomplish and we didn't get it done. It also tells you about some of these things that they're really proud of and they're moving forward. Sometimes they actually shout out team names or people's names within there. So it's great information, annual report. So there's an agency strategic plan, right? You can go to Department of Navy has a strategic plan, Department of Defense has a strategic plan, NAVC has a strategic plan. And sometimes when you keep coming down, other organizations build their own strategic plans. I call these office strategic plans. Whatever they are is the subordinate commands or subordinate offices, et cetera. So find those. And by the way, these are questions you can be asking when you're reaching out, talking to a small business professional or anybody else in an agency. Great early questions. I was trying to find your annual report, couldn't find it. Can you give me any guidance? So strategic plan, annual report, subordinate strategic plans, current budget, and planned budget. So there's FY23 budget that we're in right now, right? And FY24 budget has already been submitted. A lot of the information has already been submitted up to the president, to Congress. They're all talking about the budget for 2024. So tracking on the current spending, that's important because you can look at some of the current spending forecasted or approved in the budget and then look at how that agency's been spending money. Have they been able to spend it as fast as they expect? Things like that, right? And then the upcoming planned budget, that's really important because you can see what they're tracking. The larger your company gets, the more you almost begin to influence that budget, right? Guaranteed, Lockheed and Northrop Grumman, Booz Allen, they're doing stuff that is bringing ideas into the government that the government is thinking about, not next year maybe, but the year after and the year after and the year after. And that's where we want to get. But you can look in there and see where you can fit. So those are all strategic documents. Some other type of documents that are really important for you to be tracking on are industry briefing decks. I just mentioned Transcom, right? The United States Transportation Command's huge DoD entity or command. And they just put out their industry day, or just had an industry day on April 3rd, I think, for 2023. And in there, they talk a lot about where they're going, what they're trying to do. And then they go into these major projects that they have. And by the way, there's some SDVOs set-asides in there, some 8A set-asides in there. So you want to get in there and find these industry day slides related to your target agency, not everywhere, right? But finding in your target agency, where are they briefing industry? How do I get a copy of those decks? Sometimes they're in SAM, sometimes they're sitting on a website, sometimes they're with an organization like mine who maybe hosted them and they shared slides and then I have the slides, right? So you just have to dig. This is called research, right? You have to dig to find them. But when you find them, they're going to, industry day briefing decks will bring you a lot of good information. So coming down, next one is events, right? There's events that you can identify, past events, future events. These are a little different than industry days. Industry day tends to be more towards opportunities. Other people call them APBIs. Somebody can put that in the chat, APBI. And actually, if you can spell it out, you get extra credit. But you also want to find events that are out there, because this is a great way to do research. Is if you find events that these guys are doing, you can go in and see what have they talked about, or you can go to an event and try to ask questions, and they have matchmaking activities, et cetera. Your chance to sit down, and this is another way of doing research. research isn't just something you do behind a computer, right? You sit there and you just try to Google search everything or something. Research is also about reaching out, talking to people, asking questions, talking to the PCR, the Small Business Administration's Procurement Center representative for your agency, and telling them, hey, I'm interested in doing more and more research. Are you familiar with industry days, right? So there's all these people you can talk to, including your competimates, people who are out there. You're trying to become an agency expert, and so you research all the ways you can. Okay, I got 3 more to talk about really quick on how to do research. You can research using Google, which is my favorite, right? Google I like, or any search engine, but I like Google. And the reason I like it so much is because I can control it pretty easily, and I can actually search agency websites through Google, right? So it makes it good. But my one tip for you is when I look to do research, I'm typically trying to find documents. One way or another, I'm trying to find documents. In fact, when I used an example earlier about, I don't know if I said the agency, but it was IRS, and I just found this gold mine of information of what I was looking for. It just really catapulted forward my research for my customer. And the document wasn't even a strategic document. I was doing a Google search, and I was looking for PDF files, and it was it's not a training. It's it's like a standard operating procedure, but that's the wrong word for it. I've shared a couple of these documents out so you can see them in my LinkedIn profile, but they're these huge documents that are basically internal documents saying, this is how we're organized. This is how we run our shop. There was an 800-page one that I shared out with, from the VA that just laid out all their organization and all this other stuff. And so it's fantastic. But the way I found it was by going to Google saying, I'm looking for stuff in IRS. And then I typed in this parameter, and somebody can put it into the chat. But basically a parameter is something extra that you add into a Google search that's beyond just the keyword. So I typed in, let's say IRS, and then I typed in file type : PDF. I'm looking for an Adobe PDF document because it tends to be final document, right? And so I just said file type, one word, : PDF. And it returned all these results, and 80% of it was junk and useless, right? But I did find this golden thing. And so Google is a fantastic one. Social media, LinkedIn is awesome, right? I share all sorts of content out there, and I engage all sorts of buyers who are coming in, engaging on the content. But many of these agencies, they also have their own company pages on LinkedIn. They also have it on other social media platforms, but LinkedIn is where I love to live. But in there, you can go in and do more research. You can research about what are they posting? What are they talking about? What's hot? But one of the best things I like about it is you can research who the people are. Sometimes you can go into different company pages and there's only 100 people. In fact, this one I did yesterday, Defense Health Management, DHMS. I don't know why I can't say that acronym. Anyways, but when I went in and looked at their LinkedIn profile, there's only like 29 people there. So if I want to dig more into that PEO, I've got 29 people I could perhaps reach out to. And that came from doing research through social media. In the last one, I'm not going to dive too far into this because this is one of the tools that you should know how to use, and you should get good at it. Plus, we could do whole trainings on it, but it's a combination of 3, but you can do a ton of research on government tools. For example, USA Spending, FPDS, and SAM. Those 3 are just a wealth of information. I know that if you haven't used it before, sometimes it can feel a little confusing or overwhelming. Frankly, I'm a little confused using SAM. I still haven't developed my skills around that yet because it's a whole new process. But FPDS, I can drive down to any data I want, right? So these tools are out there. It's your job and my job to learn how to use them. But when you use them, you're going to be able to research your agency. And through all these different methods I just mentioned, you're going to become an expert at that agency. So the first step to success in the federal market is to research, right? I showed you the diagram before. And if you want to do business with the federal market or federal agencies, make the time to research your target agencies. Make the time to learn everything you can about them, to show them that you care, right? It's important to show them that you care and show them that you did the homework, because then they'll talk to you. If you found value in today's training, do me a favor, become a sustaining member. Help others benefit from all this great training that we do. And through your support, they'll be able to benefit. If your company is struggling to start and build relationships within federal agencies, consider my 90-day BD Accelerator workshop. Just go ahead and send me a message on LinkedIn if you're interested in learning more. This tends to be for companies that are a little farther along and looking to jump to the next stage. And remember, government contracting is not a secret. It's just a process. I'll see you in the next training.